In the afternoon of August 29, 2010, a man pulled into a gas station near the northeastern edge of the city of Nashville, Tennessee. He was on his way to his girlfriend's house nearby but decided to stop to fill up his car and purchase some snacks and drinks, as the pair had planned a weekend trip to a state park. Though this detour took just a few minutes, it would turn out to be incredibly consequential. This is because at that very moment, a horrifying crime was unfolding, one in which this narrow window of time would play a pivotal role. While the case would initially frustrate and baffle investigators, disturbing details would soon emerge. By the time it was all over, multiple lives would be ruined, and a plot would be exposed that was so chilling no one wanted to believe it. By all accounts, Veronica Boza was the kind of person who wasn't afraid to pursue the things in life that she was passionate about. Originally from Milan, Italy, at the age of 23, she left behind everything she had known up until that point and moved to the United States with the goal of pursuing a career in the entertainment industry. In particular, she dreamed of being a television producer. After landing an entry-level job in the industry, Veronica began to impress those around her. She took to the work quickly, and her seemingly endless energy and enthusiasm helped her connect with others almost instantly. Colleagues and friends described her as a beam of light, the kind of person that you wanted to work with and couldn't help but love and respect. A few theorized that it was her devout religious faith as a Catholic that made her so sweet, kind, and willing to help others. Despite steadfastly pursuing her dreams, Veronica was careful not to make her life completely about work. She married her husband, Tim Boza, in 1994, and 7 years later they welcomed a little boy into the world. With the birth of Veronica's son, her life felt more full than ever. That being said, the next few years were a mixed bag for Veronica. Raising her son continued to be the greatest joy of her life, but eventually, things started to become strained in her marriage. Unfortunately, like with many relationships, financial issues started to drive the couple apart. At the forefront of their problems were Veronica and Tim's opposing career trajectories. When they had first gotten together, Tim was a successful contractor who owned a business remodeling and selling homes. Over the years, though, he had fallen on hard times, and some of the financial decisions he had made reportedly put the family in jeopardy. Veronica's career, meanwhile, was only getting better. She had worked her way up as a producer and was now becoming known as a rising star in the industry. In 2009, after 15 years of marriage, the relationship came to an end. As sad as this was, for roughly the next year, Veronica and Tim did their best to co-parent their now 8-year-old son. However, just when it seemed like everything might be getting to a new normal, a tragedy came out of nowhere that would leave everyone reeling. August 29, 2010 started out like any other Sunday for Veronica Boza. That morning, she and her son made the roughly 20-minute drive from her home in Nashville's Hermitage neighborhood and attended Mass at St. Edward's Catholic Church. The pair were well known here, as Veronica was actively involved in church activities, and her son attended the adjacent Catholic school. Nobody there noticed anything out of the ordinary that day, and both Veronica and her son were acting completely normally. The service ended around 11:30 a.m., with the two of them leaving about 5 to 10 minutes later. Veronica then dropped off her son with Tim at the parking lot of a nearby grocery store, where they had agreed to meet as part of their ongoing shared custody agreement. After that, she started heading back home. On the way, Veronica would make 3 phone calls. Sadly, she had no way of knowing that these would later become of immense importance because, as it turned out, they would be the last phone calls the 39-year-old would ever make. The first call was to her boyfriend, Brian Robinson, at 12:01 p.m. The final call and message were to her friend Garnett between 12:07 and 12:08. Both women would later say that it sounded like Veronica was driving in her car when she had made the calls. Just 12 minutes later, Brian pulled into the driveway of Veronica's house. What was waiting for him inside was truly the stuff of nightmares. At 12:15 p.m. that day, Nashville police received a frantic 911 call. The caller identified himself as Brian Robinson and said that he needed immediate help at his girlfriend's house in Hermitage. When officers arrived at the residence, they encountered an unsettling scene. The garage and front doors to the property were both open, and inside, there were obvious signs of disarray. Curtains had been pulled down in the living room, chairs were overturned, and cushions on a nearby couch were out of place. All of it led straight to a chilling crime scene. On the living room floor was Veronica Boza. She was lying in a pool of blood and had no vital signs. Sadly, she could not be saved. An autopsy would soon reveal that Veronica had been shot several times, with the final fatal bullet striking her in the head. Whoever had done this was determined to make sure that she was dead. Gut-wrenchingly, it appeared that she had fought for her life. Powder burns to one of her hands suggested that she had tried to grab the gun away from the killer as they shot. Following the disheveled path of items in the house, authorities went outside to the unclosed garage. Inside was Veronica's vehicle, whose driver's side door was also wide open. Her purse was still on the passenger seat, though items from inside, including her sunglasses, were strewn across the garage floor. Her white iPhone was nowhere to be found. Based on these details, authorities were able to piece together what they believed were Veronica's final terrifying moments. It appeared that she had been followed home and ambushed on her driveway as she was still preparing to get out of her car. She had managed to run from the vehicle and make it inside, but the chase had ended in the living room, where Veronica had tragically been shot to death. While taking a closer look at the crime scene, investigators uncovered their first major clues. Jewelry that was out in the open had been left untouched, as had an envelope on a nearby counter that contained $400 in cash, as well as a blank check. It seemed to suggest that robbery was not the motive behind the killing. At the same time, no murder weapon was found at the scene, and the killer had gone to the trouble of picking up the spent shell casings from the gun in an obvious attempt to cover their tracks. Luckily for detectives, though, the perpetrator hadn't been as thorough as they had thought. One shell casing had been left behind, having landed out of view, tucked near the baseboards of one of the living room walls. Once recovered, the shell casing was sent off for testing. With an explanation of how the crime had unfolded now coming together, authorities next needed to try and understand the who and the why. And, as far as they were concerned, there were many possibilities to consider. At this point, Tim Boza, Veronica's ex-husband, had an alibi. He was with his son at the time of the murder. So, too, did Brian Robinson, whose alibi checked out when he picked up Veronica's son from the grocery store parking lot just after 12 p.m. Meanwhile, Garnett, who received the final call and message from Veronica, also claimed to have an alibi, as did a few others who were questioned. Recognizing the need to explore fresh leads in the case, detectives combed through Veronica's neighborhood, questioning residents about any overlooked suspicious activities during the time of the crime. A couple of individuals offered information about an SUV parked in the alley near Veronica's house, potentially white, silver, or another light metallic color around the time of the murder. Concurrently, ballistic analysis confirmed that the recovered shell casing was fired from a high .9mm handgun. The most significant breakthrough occurred when investigators obtained Veronica's complete cell phone records, including GPS data. The phone's movement traced Veronica's morning routine to church, the meeting with Tim, and back home. However, after Veronica's murder, her iPhone mysteriously started moving again, heading west towards the interstate before going offline. This led detectives to conclude that the killer had taken Veronica's phone. Further analysis of Brian Robinson and Tim Boza's cell phone records corroborated their alibis. Still, a red flag emerged in Tim's extensive calls to a number owned by Corey Cotham, known as Big Man. After discovering the high number of calls from Tim to Corey, investigators delved into Corey's background. Corey, a mutual friend and former housemate of Tim and Veronica, had a less than stellar reputation, including a history of assaulting women and attempting to exploit them for money. Upon obtaining Corey's cell phone records and scrutinizing GPS data, detectives found his phone near the crime scene and the church on the morning of the murder. Post-murder, Corey's phone movements eerily mirrored Veronica's iPhone. When questioned, Corey initially lied about his whereabouts, claiming to be with a woman named Jenny. However, investigators uncovered Jenny's involvement when she revealed she had stolen her ex-husband's high .9mm handgun, which she had hidden in a red collapsible lunch bag. The bag and handgun had gone missing, and the only person with access to Jenny's vehicle during that time was Corey. Forensic analysis of recovered casings from Jenny's ex-husband's property confirmed the murder weapons linked to Corey. As authorities intensified their investigation, Corey's vehicle, a champagne-colored Cadillac Escalade, proved pivotal. Inside, seemingly ordinary items and Corey's work-related black sleeve mask and latex gloves were found. However, Jenny's revelation about Corey's involvement in the stolen handgun led to a breakthrough. A search of Corey's phone revealed a deleted image of the murder weapon. Meanwhile, Jenny, now cooperating with the police, informed them of Corey's plan to flee the country. During a recorded call with Jenny, Corey unwittingly divulged details only the killer would know, solidifying the case against him. Jenny's cooperation and revelations about Corey's plan prompted swift action from detectives. They arrested both Corey and Tim. Tim, in a shocking confession, disclosed that the murder was part of a twisted plot he and Corey had concocted, inspired by a movie. Tim claimed he didn't intend to go through with it, but evidence suggested otherwise. While Tim and Corey were tried separately, the prosecution built a case arguing that Tim, driven by bitterness and financial distress, conspired with Corey to commit the murder in a crisscross arrangement. Tim, aware of the life insurance payout, orchestrated the plan, with Corey following and executing the crime. Both were convicted of first-degree premeditated murder, with Tim receiving a life sentence without parole for 51 years and Corey a life sentence without parole. Before we conclude, we express immense gratitude to those who followed this narrative. If you found it intriguing and informative, we'd appreciate your likes, subscribes, and notifications to stay updated on our latest content.